Good afternoon. Welcome to another session of Curious Investors. I hope you're curious no matter what your age, whether you're 10, 20, or 80. I hope you remain curious about life and hopefully curious about investing. And that's the point of this show, is just to give you some encouragement in your journey as an investor and present some ideas that might offer some encouragement and better decision making. Got it. Before we kick this thing off, I've got to give you a picture of the disclaimers here and what that might look like for you. And so let's cover what the risks are for you in this thing. So we are doing this for educational purposes only. There'll be no specific recommendations being made. And if you need specific investments, you need to talk specifically to a advisor at Gimbel Financial or your financial advisor. We have no crystal balls. This is strictly our opinions. Stock investing includes risk, including fluctuation or price or loss of principal. We're not going to talk about stocks today, but if we would have, you need to know that you can lose money and lose a lot of money in the stock market if you're not careful. Content provided is for general information, not intended for specific recommendations. So I'm not giving you specific advice today, just general advice. So any economic forecasts that might eke out of this are just a forecast. They're an estimate of what we think happens. There's no guarantees, no crystal balls, and so we don't know what the future has in store. We're just kind of giving you an idea of our opinions on these things. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, which is a member at FINRA and SIPC. LPL is not part of Gimbel, and Gimbel is only associated with LPL. We're a registered investment advisor, and we're completely separate than LPL Financial. There you have it. Those are the disclaimers. Today, let's talk about debt, D-E-B-T. Debt is quite an interesting idea. It is when you borrow money from someone else to get something today for which you couldn't do with your own resources, or you choose not to do with your own resources. And that's what we want to talk about, is what does that mean? How does that affect you? And what possibilities are available to you as you think about your current, future, and past debt. So there's an old English author by the name of Samuel Johnson, and Samuel Johnson said, "Don't accustom yourself to consider debt only an inconvenience. You'll find it to be a calamity." Debt is a way of accelerating your life, accelerating your possible wealth, accelerating the way you get things done, and consequently, if you are wrong, it can accelerate your problems, your losses, and things of that nature. And that's what debt does. And Gimbel Financial, we've been big fans of people getting out of debt for many, many years, and we continue to be advocates of debt-free living. And we understand how debt works and what that might mean to you. However, we found that those who are doing what they like to do, who are consistently kicking in at that and doing the best they can, those who are focused on what's important to them and who are managing their resources wisely, don't need to rely too heavily on debt. And so I mentioned this to you as I'm approaching 60 years old. My wife and I have been out of debt, including our house, almost since age 35. So we've lived debt-free for a long time, and it offers all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of opportunities. For me, one of the greatest of those is a less stressful lifestyle. When I don't owe anybody anything, I realized that primarily I just need to cover my living expenses, which include housing, shelter costs, which are utilities. It includes clothing and food and utilities and things of that nature. And so there's not a lot of required costs when you're debt free. Then you have also more room for the luxuries of life, which you can see over my shoulder. There's a pinball machine, which is a luxury item for which I enjoy. But I didn't borrow to get that. That was something we paid for on a cash basis, and we enjoy that. And that's the benefits of cash-free living. All right, let's talk a little bit about debt. I'm going to try to show you a video here and see if I've got the skills to do that. Debt is also often referred to as leverage. And when you leverage something, you're using a lever to lift something up that you couldn't otherwise lift up on your own. And so let's watch this video and see how levering something works. And so let's see here. on my screen share. Go back and start that over. This is a short video just about the science of a lever. And the picture of the science of how a lever works will help you also considering how it works in a financial basis. Here we go. All right, there you have it. You have
We get it. You don't really want your kids watching videos.
All right, hopefully the sound is shut off on that. I got to stop the video because I don't need more of these. There you go. So you've got a brief video of what a lever does, and a lever requires 3 components: effort, a fulcrum, and a load. And if we take that to an economic example, the effort would be your word, like your promise, your work, and maybe your resources that you might put up as collateral for a loan. The fulcrum, the thing that it pivots off of to lift something that you couldn't ordinarily have, would be the loan. And the example of a house would be the load. So suppose you wanted to buy a $100,000 house. The mortgage is the fulcrum, the pivot point on that. The load would be the $100,000 house, and the effort would be your ability to earn that monthly payment to push up the value of that house. And that's how leverage works. Well, if you put 10% down on a house, the load isn't nearly as heavy if you put 0% down on that. And so as you borrow money, the load of what you're borrowing will tend to wear on you. If you get that load too big, it's going to require a lot more effort, a lot more thoughts, a lot more time and energy to continue to lift that load off the ground. And that's what leverage means. When you hear the word leverage, it means somebody is borrowing something to get something for which they cannot afford today. And debt does that. For me, as a younger man, I discovered that my mental peace of mind couldn't handle debt very well. The idea of owing somebody and being forced to work for something for which I couldn't really afford until I borrowed money just added stress to my life that didn't really fit my personality very well. And that's what helped us to accelerate our debt elimination plan. And another quote, I gave you the quote from Samuel Johnson that you'll find debt to be a calamity. There's an old ancient quote that says, just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. And what that means is that if I lend you money, you're somewhat indebted to me to meet whatever requirements I might throw out to you. So in the example of a house, you borrow money from a bank or mortgage company in order to buy the house. Well, you're not a servant to that mortgage company or a bank. What you really become a servant to is the middleman, which is your job. So you as the borrower are a servant to your employer who gives you the resources to pay the mortgage payment. And so no matter how you look at a loan, no matter how you look at a situation, that leverage will put pressure, a load on you in order to require some effort from you to take that leverage out of your life. And so debt is a part of economic planning for your own future that you can get ahead of yourself. You can borrow more money than you really should, because there's not too many people out there telling you don't borrow money. The lending institutions are often incentivized by getting you to borrow more, so they're not really on the same side of the equation as you are. And so by you choosing to minimize your use of debt, you're going to take a load off your shoulders and deleverage your own situation. The idea of debt it's been around for a long, long time. Years ago, there used to be debtor's prison. So if you wouldn't pay back what you borrowed, you had to go to prison and work it off, which is really crazy that that's how it is or was. It's not like that, I don't think, in any places in the world. It might be, but I'm not aware of any place in the world where that goes on today. However, there's just a lot of risk with that. And so you're presuming upon the future for which you don't really know what's going to happen. So if you borrow a lot of money for something and you don't know what the future has in store, you might find yourself surprised by what unfolds in the future, and you may not have the ability to meet those demands that are upon you. So if you're considering debt and you're looking at it, there's cars that you can get in debt for. Maybe some of you have already got in debt for college and that's already behind you, and now you're wondering how you're going to pay that off. There's credit cards, and then we've mentioned mortgage debt, and there's a number of other ways you can borrow money. But let's talk about consumer debt. Consumer debt would be those things for which you consume and they depreciate in value. If I bought a book, which I have on my bookshelf over there, that's a consumer debt. Whatever price I paid for it, it's unlikely that I'm going to get that amount out of it if I try to sell it. And so a credit card, for instance, maybe will have an 18% interest rate on it. So if I buy $1,000 worth of things on my credit card and I don't pay that $1,000 back, that 18% interest rate is going to cost me $180 a year or $15 a month. $15 a month for something just to pay the interest on it, not to pay back the principal. I'm going to have to pay some number more than that to pay back the principal, but I'll be paying $15 a month for having a $1,000 balance in general on a credit card. That's really expensive, and it's not a wise use of your energy. I did that when I was first out of college. I carried some credit cards and I started kind of sharpening my pencil, looking at the cost of that, and I was appalled at how I had mismanaged my resources by doing that. I might have bought pizzas on my credit card and then started paying 15% per year for that pizza that was long gone. And so credit cards are an easy way to get in trouble with debt. And so I'd encourage you to avoid credit card debt as much as possible. If you use credit cards, be sure to pay those things off every month. And if you can't pay those things off every month, establish a plan for which you can get them paid off quickly. And we can talk about that briefly. Beyond consumer debt, like credit cards, there's automobile car payments. Again, those things, they accelerate your ability to buy a car for which you really can't afford if you have to take out a car loan. And so we can talk at other times. Feel free to call me or to email us at Kimball Financial. That there's a way where you can take your ability to buy a car today and put a plan in place so you can begin to pay cash for highly reliable, nice cars in the not too distant future to help avoid car payments and not have those all your life. A lot of people believe you have to have car payments for your entire life, and it's not true. You can get really nice cars in a very simplified strategy that we can help you set up in place. Student loans, again, if you haven't got student loans yet, work with your financial advisor to try to get a plan where you don't have to stack up thousands and thousands of student loans out there, because there's ways to get your college done without accumulating mass piles of student loans. And I would encourage you to take that into serious consideration. If you've already got those student loans in place, be sure to be consistent in paying those things back as you go, as you might think that they're never going to come to an end, but your consistency in regularly paying those and maybe paying a little extra will get the end of those loans sooner than you might imagine. And then finally, there's the more longer term things like a mortgage. A mortgage, often you need a 10% down payment to avoid what's called private mortgage insurance. And we often highly encourage that because the cost of private mortgage insurance is pretty extreme. And if you can save up 10% of the cost of your house, you're going to find yourself in a much better financial situation. So here's the deal. What if you've already got behind on your debt? What if you already have some of these things and you're trying to balance your income, your experience of life, your regular expenses and pay off your debt, how might one go about accelerating their debt? A friend of mine, Howard Dayton, taught me many, many years ago, if a family chooses to, they can be consumer debt free in 3 years and completely debt free, including their mortgage, in 7 years. There's no guarantee this is going to happen, but basically what he said, if you take a disciplined approach and choose that debt freedom is going to be a high priority to you, you'll find that your cash flow very likely, assuming no unemployment or any extreme situations pop up during that time frame, will eliminate your debt very quickly. The reason for some of that is because the lenders know certain ratios of how much money they can lend you, and it's all based on your financial situation. And so the fact that those 3 and 7 year things have worked pretty consistently over the years for people as we've helped them get debt free is really a function that the lenders won't lend you much more than that. They will lend up to a point, and at that point above that, it becomes too risky for them. And so as long as you have the financial situation and you're not necessarily going into bankruptcy or something like that, there's some real hope that you can get rid of that consumer debt pretty quickly, and then the mortgages quickly as you might choose after that. But definitely, if you can live a life free of the consumer debt, you're going to find a lot less stress, a lot less load on the leverage that you put in your life. We definitely discourage leveraging on economic investments like stocks and bonds. We think that's a really bad idea, and we can go into that another time. Think about it this way. Suppose you're paying credit card interest to that 18% a year that I mentioned earlier. Say you have $5,000 on credit card interest, and maybe you've saved up and you worked hard to get a $5,000 emergency fund. Generally, our opinion would be that you would take $4,000 of that emergency fund that you're currently earning 0 and put it towards that credit card balance so that you can basically pay yourself that 18% interest that you were previously paying the bank. You'd still have a $1,000 emergency fund, but you would have knocked out, what is that, 880 times 4, 360, $720 a year of interest by just switching that over, for which you weren't going to get any interest off that money in today's economy anyway. So as you look at things that way, and if you're really prioritizing your retirement and you're carrying debt like this, you might just lower your retirement contributions to the level for which your employer matches for the time being, and then use that free cash flow to get rid of that consumer debt, because you're going to basically be putting money aside and then digging a hole in debt with paying those high interest rates. And so we'd encourage you to prioritize consumer debt, even as high or even sometimes higher than your retirement savings, depending on your situation. And we can specifically talk to you about that. The easiest strategy from my vantage point is to take all of the loans that you have, make a list of them, and then rank them from the smallest monthly payment requirement to the largest monthly payment requirement, and then pay the minimum on all the loans except for the smallest one. Then any free money you can get, maybe you've got some old things you can sell and get some extra money, but any free cash flow, any free money you can get from selling something on eBay, put it towards that smallest loan. Once you pay off that smallest loan, then you take what that monthly payment was and add that to your next smallest loan, and just keep doing this process all along the way, not accumulating any other debt, because any debt you accumulate is going to send you backwards in the progress to becoming consumer debt free. So that's the essence of debt. It works against you. It's a load that'll wear on you as you put out the effort or the energy to work and to use your resources to gain prosperity in the months and years ahead. Should you have any questions about managing debt and how to get yourself in a better state of mind with your debt situation, feel free to reach out to the professionals at Gimbel Financial. We're thankful for you and hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you real soon. Take care.